Jagannath Swami ki jai. We don't need it. Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Avatume. Haribo. Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatume. Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jagannath. Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatume. Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatume. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Tai Go Premanandi, Jagannath Swami ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschati Dasatari. So, I had written something that said, if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. And Madhusudan Hari wanted me to speak about that. And I can share my realizations. It can sometimes sound like a topic that it's not really in our Shastra, or that Prabhupada hasn't spoken about. But he has spoken about it, maybe not exactly in the way that modern psychology speaks about it, but he has spoken about it. In the sense that we have a part of us that sometimes doesn't care enough to do what's good for us. Like, if you eat that, it's not good for you. Yeah, I know, I don't care. You develop that as naturally as children. You shouldn't eat sweets, it's bad for you. I don't care. Right? You should do this, it's good for you. No, I don't want to do it, I don't care. So that's normal for children, but as adults, it will tend to undermine everything we could do good for ourselves. And in some cases, that stems from a lack of care, self-care, which could be something that could greatly undermine our devotional service. So Prabhupada had once given the example of what he called spiritual suicide. How can you have spiritual suicide if the soul is eternal? But he coined this term, spiritual suicide, and he also used the phrase, killer of the soul. So Krishna says the soul can't be killed, and then Prabhupada's talking about killer of the soul. So how can you be a killer of the soul? So he gave an example. Could we close that door? Prabhupada gave an example that, let's say, you go off on your own to a secluded place and you have a knife. Who's going to stop you from killing yourself? Nobody. So then he said that you have a human form of life and you have all the facility to become Krishna conscious. And if you don't take it, then it's spiritual suicide. You're actually killing yourself. So there was this sense of doing something self-destructive other than alcohol or drugs or some bad habit, but just not taking the Krishna consciousness. That was kind of suicide, because you have the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. You have the advantage. So then there was a letter that Prabhupada wrote. I'm not sure what year this was, but this letter was kind of, you could say, new information to us. We were very enthusiastic to give Krishna consciousness to others, and we always were under the impression that giving Krishna consciousness was the highest service. That's the highest thing you can do as a devotee, is give Krishna consciousness, right? Compassion. So that question was asked to Prabhupada, is Sankirtan the highest? And Prabhupada said Sankirtan is the highest, but there's something higher than Sankirtan. There's something higher than saving conditioned souls. Does anybody know what's higher than saving conditioned souls? Save yourself. So this was like years after I'd been a devotee that Prabhupada revealed this. And of course, you can understand logically, if you're drowning, you can't save anyone else who's drowning, right? So then higher than saving everyone else is to save yourself. Get on the land and throw the rope to others. But if you're in the water, you can't save them. At the same time, your duty to your spiritual master is to become pure and go back to Godhead. So you have that as your first duty. And when you take initiation, in a sense, you're promising to become a pure devotee. And your spiritual master's mission is to get you out of the world, and so your service is to get out of the world. That's your first duty. If you try to save others and you don't save yourself, then you've missed the first duty. But you remember the story I told last night. It's very interesting. About the girl who, on Janmashtami, or one day she was very busy and she didn't finish her rounds. She only chanted 3 rounds. And my first thought was, don't you care enough about your Krishna consciousness to finish your rounds? Don't you care enough about yourself? That was my first thought. That why may someone neglect a vow they made? And you might say, in every case, this may not be true, but I think directly or indirectly it's true. Because I asked her, I said, do you love yourself? Or I asked some question like that. Do you not like yourself? Or do you not care for yourself? No, what I asked her was, did you have a bad childhood? She said, can you tell me why do you think it is I didn't finish my rounds? And first question I said, did you have a bad childhood? It was a very strange question to ask. When someone asking you, why didn't I finish my rounds? Can you help me understand? And I say, did you have a bad childhood? It's like, it doesn't seem to make sense. And she said, yes, I did. And I said, so we talked about it. Something about her parents didn't really love her, or didn't express the love. She didn't, in any case, she didn't feel love from her parents. So if you don't feel love from your parents, it can make you feel like you're not really worth being loved, right? Because if your neighbor doesn't love you, that's one thing. If your mother doesn't love you, you probably think there's something wrong with you, because she's supposed to love me, and if she doesn't love me, maybe there's something wrong with me. That's how a child would think. So she said, yes, my parents didn't love me. And I said, do you think that you didn't finish your rounds because you don't really care that much about yourself? And she said, yes, that's the reason. And I said, because your parents didn't care, you don't care? And she said, yes. So the reason that she didn't finish her rounds is because her mother didn't love her. What do you think of that? Isn't that interesting? So, the reason that I said that to her was that I often felt that when you do sadhana bhakti, that is the highest form of self-love you can manifest. Because you're giving yourself Krishna, and yourself wants Krishna, so you're giving yourself the greatest gift. Isn't it? And because you're giving yourself the greatest gift, that's the greatest form of self-love. So just to sit down and chant 16 good rounds, to me, is like the supreme form of self-love. Because you're giving yourself the highest thing. And you're taking the time and trouble to give it to yourself. So you're actually loving yourself. Even though you may be chanting for purity, for helping people, but actually you're loving yourself. You agree? And then, to some degree, as Prabhupada said, if you don't, you're killing yourself. You're committing spiritual suicide, which is kind of the opposite of loving yourself. Now, I think about 4 or 5, 6 places Prabhupada used the word killer of the soul. No, he used the word self-envy. And I had written an article, and this article was then being put in a book, and I had an editor, and she was a god sister of mine. So she knew the books fairly well. And she was questioning, this self-envy sounds like a psychological term, not something from our Shastra. And she said, you can't use this because, people will criticize you if you're just pulling in some psychological term in a spiritual book. And then I sent her, I think, 4 references where Prabhupada used it. And we all know in Bhagavad Gita, you know that shloka? He's envious of himself. So, if you don't give yourself Krishna consciousness, then you can say you're envious of yourself. Envious in the sense that you're damaging yourself. Anyway, these are some thoughts to consider. Of why I may perhaps neglect my spiritual life. Is there in some way, is there a little voice that says, I don't care? You ever heard that voice? It says, I don't care. Yeah. It's 10 o'clock at night, you're kind of hungry, but it's probably better just to go to sleep. And then the mind says, eat a Govardhan plate before you go to bed. And the intelligence says, probably not a good idea. And that little voice says, I don't care. You ever heard that voice? Yeah. That's what we're talking about. That little voice that says, I don't care. Where is that coming from? That's coming from a place that we want to root out because that voice is undermining what we need to be doing. It's a kind of lack of self-caring that's required to be Krishna conscious. You agree? Because that's what sadhana means. You're doing something you shouldn't do that's not healthy, and the little voice says, I don't care. You're eating something that's not good for you, the little voice says, I don't care. Right? You don't finish your rounds, the little voice says, I don't care. That's a problem. So when Prabhupada's saying, save yourself first, then I think we can say that he really wants us to be in that consciousness, to care for ourselves. Because if we don't have that mentality, then Prabhupada's saying it's kind of like spiritual suicide. Now, we had spoken a little bit yesterday about a consciousness where we tend to put ourselves down. And that consciousness is somewhat of a manifestation of this problem. If you put yourself down, if you don't think you're a valuable entity, if you don't think you're worthy of Krishna's love or worthy of being Krishna conscious, then probably that little voice can get pretty loud. Well, who cares? I'm not that important. I don't care. I'm not worth it. Does that make sense? Now, if we look at how Prabhupada dealt with the devotees, he never dealt with anybody as if they were unworthy. He dealt with everyone as if they're valuable. And you know that Prabhupada answered every letter? Every single letter that was written to him, he answered it. So that means everyone is valuable. And I think in many cases he made us feel valuable, and we didn't feel valuable ourselves. So now, somebody might think, if I feel unworthy, that's Krishna conscious, because that's a sign of humility. Right? And sometimes this word is used. You're a worthless servant. Right? Okay. So then someone might say, well, Mahatma Prabhu, what you're saying you can't back up in Shastra, because right there, Shastra, the humble devotee says, I'm wretched, I'm worthless, I'm lower than a worm and stool, like that. So let me explain my understanding of that. My understanding is that as a symptom of prema, a devotee will feel low. And therefore, a devotee may say, I feel lower than a worm and stool, because he actually does. As a byproduct, it's a symptomatic byproduct of love that such intense humility develops that he feels so low, he doesn't get much lower than a worm and stool. That one who has so much love of Krishna feels that they don't, and one who doesn't have it feels that they do. That's a byproduct. So, if you say, I feel lower than a worm and stool, I say to you, no, you don't. You cannot possibly feel that way. Unless you're mentally ill or you have prema. And there's no use in saying that I do, because you don't. Honestly, if any one of you feels lower than a worm and stool, then you should immediately enter a mental hospital and get cured. Because that is not a normal way to think for a normal person, is it? It's a normal way to think when you have love of Krishna. But when you don't have love of Krishna, it's not a normal way to think. Does that make sense? So don't ever say, I feel lower than a worm and stool. Because you don't. You can't possibly feel that way unless you're crazy. You cannot possibly feel that way. Unless you're crazy or you have love of Krishna. Because that intense humility you can't experience in the conditioned state. So, does that make sense? So now we have a problem that's crept up in the Hare Krishna movement. And the problem is that when I was young, the word low self-esteem, I never heard it. It's something that came up, I think, in the 1980s or 90s. And teachers were very careful not to make anybody feel bad, no matter if they even did something bad. They were very careful. They were told, you can't make the students feel bad about themselves. They have to feel good about themselves all the time. And what they found out is that generation is completely spoiled. And when they went in the workplace, if anyone said anything bad about them, they couldn't take it, because they were raised to always feel good about themselves. This whole self-esteem thing became a big issue, that people don't love themselves or they feel bad about themselves. And so I've noticed that when I was a devotee in my generation, that wasn't such an issue. I don't remember that people complaining about it. But now it's a big issue. Bad families, parents that don't love their children, don't take care of their children. So what I've noticed is that when we're talking about the need to be humble, the need to look at our faults, the need to feel wretched and useless and so on, if that is spoken to someone who has low self-esteem, it exasperates their low self-esteem and they feel even worse. And so it's a real challenge for someone with low self-esteem to understand and practice humility, because they're completely different, but they look the same. Like we say, a weed, the creeper and the weed, sometimes they look the same. How does low self-esteem look? I'm worthless, I'm useless, I'm the worst, there's nothing good about me. Right? That's what it looks like, right? I can't do anything. And that's also what humility looks like, right? But they're completely different. Because humility is coming from a very elevated stage of Krishna consciousness, and low self-esteem is coming from some emotional or psychological problem. But the words come out the same. I'm lower, I'm useless, I'm wretched. But when a pure devotee says, I'm low, useless, and wretched, he doesn't act in the way a person with self-esteem acts who says, I'm low, useless, and wretched. So I found that in dealing with the topic of humility, we have to be a little careful. Because sometimes in talking about humility, we play into devotees who have low self-esteem, and that talks about humility feed into their low self-esteem because they think that's humility, and becomes a problem. I'm supposed to feel useless and unworthy. But what if you feel that way as a result of a psychological problem, not as a result of a Krishna conscious advancement? Then it becomes a problem. So that's something we have to be careful about. And so I've realized that if any devotee that I'm counseling has issues with self-esteem, I don't talk about humility, because I always see it doesn't have a good effect. Because they're already humble in a negative way, in an unhealthy way. And if I talk about humility, they just become more unhealthy. Does that make sense? So, I think we need at least to identify what would be healthy humility and what would be unhealthy humility. Now, you probably know that story where a devotee said to Prabhupada, I'm the lowest. And Prabhupada said, you're not, what did he say? You're not, I'm the most fallen. And Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. And it was interesting because I had just read, I don't know where I read this, but it wasn't, I'm trying to think where I read it. But someone who wasn't a devotee basically said the same thing, that people look for recognition in becoming the lowest when they can't become the highest. Because you'll stand out either on the top of the pile or the bottom. Or maybe you'll get more sympathy at the bottom. But it's basically what Prabhupada said, you're trying to get recognition for being the lowest. So that's something to consider, that sometimes you may, in the guise of humility, be looking for recognition as the most humble devotee in Bangalore. And maybe you'll even think on Sunday feast you'll get an award for being the most humble devotee in Bangalore. And you can become proud of that. Right? You can become proud of being the most humble devotee. I think another reason Prabhupada said you're not the most anything is that when you're actually not humble and you say I'm the most fallen, that can be used as an excuse. Prabhu, why didn't you do that? Well, what do you expect? I'm the most fallen. If you're the most fallen, you don't do that. Why didn't you finish your rounds? What do you expect? I'm the most fallen. I don't finish my rounds. So Prabhupada also understood that mentality. So that mentality, it's obviously not humility, right? It's just most fallen becomes an excuse. So in our society, sometimes we're a little bit loose about talking about being the most fallen and the lowest and the worm and stool and all this. And it just doesn't equate to where we're at. And I think the best manifestation of humility that we can show is getting along. Do you know that in the stage of bhava, there are 8 symptoms of ecstasy? Like tears, eruptions, choking, fainting, and so forth. But Rupa Goswami also lists, I think, 10 other qualities. Like he's detached, he's humble, he utilizes every moment, and so forth. And the reason he lists those, does anybody know the reason that he doesn't just list the ecstatic symptoms, but he lists these other qualities of action? Does anybody know why? Yes?
Because he wants to differentiate between the sahajiyas and...
Yeah, because anybody could, Hare Krishna. I could sit up here and do a show, and you could all think, wow, Mahatma Prabhu's, he's exhibiting the 8 ecstatic symptoms, right? And then I can roll off, just happen to have a cushion over here for the performance, and I can roll off the asana in ecstasy, and I could bang my head on the floor. Anybody can do that, and the better actor you are, the more believable it'll be. So he lists the other qualities, right? He lists the other qualities, because not everybody can fake detachment. You actually have to be detached. You can fake it for a while, like Nityananda Playboy. He can fake it, but he eventually gets caught. So you can only fake it for a while, right? But you can't fake permanently your detachment or your humility. You can't fake it. Or the other qualifications of one, utilizing every moment and so forth. So in the same way, I can go around and say, Prabhu, I'm a worm and stool. Kick me in the face. That's what I deserve. You don't know how low I am. Just, Prabhu, I'm so sorry you had to see me. You probably should take a bath now. You know, like, anybody can do that, right? And think that's, but can we actually get along? Can I actually be humble with someone I'm envious of? Yeah. That for us is how humility should be manifest, not this artificial talk. I'm lower than this and lower than that. Because you don't believe it anyway. Do you? You don't. Sounds good. It looks good, right? Okay. Now, there's a problem with low self-esteem. Low self-esteem means that I feel that I'm worse than I actually am. Like objectively, I'm here, but subjectively, I feel here. That's low self-esteem. I actually feel lower than I am. I'm really bad. Nobody likes me. Everything I do is wrong. Everything I do is bad. You know, that kind of thing. Which is not true. Somebody looks at you the wrong way. That means he doesn't like me. Right? That's low self. If you say something to somebody and you get this extreme reaction and you can't figure, you say, what did I say? I just said, you're looking nice today. Yeah, but you haven't said that for 5 days. You're just trying to bribe me or something. I'm serious. I've had this experience with people, you know. Or you're just saying that, what do you want? You want something from. When you get these kind of reactions, that's generally because someone has very low self-esteem, and everything is taken as a put down. They're being they take everything as you're putting me down, you're minimizing me. Right? So that's a very unhealthy state to be in, isn't it? And when you're in that state, as I was saying earlier, you can't really better yourself because you don't care enough about yourself to better yourself, because I'm so worthless. Why put out any energy to help myself? Right? Because what's the use? I'm not worth it. Who cares? Who cares anyway what I do? These are signs of low self-esteem. Who cares what I do? And why should I do it anyway? I'm not worth it. Nobody's going to like it. If I do it, no one's going to like it. No one's going to say anything. No one's going to appreciate it. So why should I do it? These are abnormal reactions, right? So this is starting to pervade society. I was saying last night, a lot of people who are guilty, people who can't forgive themselves, people who have low self-esteem, it was inherited by being put down. And so a lot of what they're now saying to themselves are the things people said to them. You'll never be good at this. No one likes you, whatever. You know, and it was just programmed in there. So it was very detrimental. So I think one of the great services we can do to devotees is to find something good and tell them. Because I've found that a lot of devotees don't know they're good at something that they're good at, because their self-esteem is so low, they don't even think they can be good at anything. Or they don't think they can be good at some things. And just to point it out is a great service to them. Prabhu, you know you did this yesterday, that was fantastic. Did anyone ever tell you you're really good at this? I am. And to me, oftentimes, they're so good at something, it's so obvious, everybody can see it except them. Isn't that amazing? So low self-esteem can do that to you. You can't even see what you're good at. Or it is, you feel so low that you can't allow yourself to feel good about anything, because that would interfere with feeling low. And feeling low is your comfort zone. Does that make sense? Prabhu, you're good at that. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Don't say I am. I'm not. No, you are. No, I'm not. That would throw out your self-image, because your self-image is low. But not low in purity, low psychologically. Right? So we can help such devotees by gently acknowledging, no, really, I think you're really good. I appreciate that. And that is therapeutic. People who have low self-esteem need to hear that. And people need to hear that. They need to tell themselves that. Now, here's another thing, another lesson I learned on the road. I once did an exercise which was very awkward to do as a Hare Krishna devotee. And the facilitator said, tell your partner all the things you like about yourself. Now that's not something we normally do in the Hare Krishna temple. We might do an exercise like, tell your partner everything that's wrong with you. Because that way, you'll be humble, right? But the reason he did that exercise and he was a devotee is because that's what we do all the time. We're always telling ourselves what's wrong with us. Not out of humility, just out of being not healthy. So he said, tell your partner what you like about yourself. Now, if a person has low self-esteem and you ask them to do this exercise, the first thing they'll do is they'll make a face, like it's very uncomfortable. Because number one, it's uncomfortable to say anything good about themselves because they live in, I'm bad, that's their comfort zone. And because they feel that way, they make that face because they can't think of anything good. And because they can't think of anything good, that makes them feel bad. Now, do you believe that there are people who have no good about them? Is there anybody that has no good about them? Everybody has some good, right? So to ask a person, tell me something good about you, and they can't say it, that's a problem. And I'm just throwing this out for you. Because right now, I'm asking you to say good things about yourself. How do you feel right now? The ones who feel great, you think, oh, he's proud. Not necessarily. The point is that if in our stage of Krishna consciousness we only think bad things about ourselves, it's symptomatic of the mode of ignorance, not transcendence. It's not because we're transcendental, it's because we're in the mode of ignorance. So a healthy state is, well, I'm good at this and I'm good at that, and I like the fact that I do this and I don't do that, and I've always been a good person, I like to help people, and I'm a good musician, and I'm a good writer, I'm a good artist, I like the fact that, I'm friendly with people like that. That's just normal, right? But devotee, no, you can't say that, you're becoming proud and arrogant and so forth. But my point is that if you have low self-esteem and you're asked to say good things about you, it puts you in complete anxiety. And the harder it is to say the good things, and the less you say, the lower your self-esteem is. Generally, that's what I've seen. And people who have low self-esteem need to say good things about themselves. We were saying yesterday, you remember I was saying yesterday, let's say you made a vow you can't keep. You may have to adjust the vow to something you can keep. Because let's say you can't chant 16, so you negotiate with your guru, for the time being you'll chant 8. So now, before that, 8 was failure, now 8 is success. Right? So now, what's the chance of getting back to 16? If you're a failure or you're a success? You're a success because it's positive, right? You understand? So to have some kind of positive feeling about yourself is required to be successful. Yeah. Isn't it? Another aspect of low self-esteem or lack of self-love, is that it's very selfish. Because you always think about how bad you feel. And you're always thinking about yourself. And humility is not selfish. Low self-esteem is selfish. Me, poor me, I'm bad. But it's about me. And humility is not about me. It's about Krishna. I'm far from Krishna. I'm low because I'm far from Krishna. Do you know the difference between being bad and acting badly? You understand that? You know the difference between failing and being a failure? Jagannath Swami ki jai. Krishna Badai. If you fail, are you a failure? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. If you fail, does that mean you're a failure? Raise your hand. What does it mean? It means you failed at that time. Your failure and you are two different things, right? So with low self-esteem, failing and being a failure are the same. When you fail, you identify it as a problem with you as a being. I am a failure. You understand? There's a difference. So it's a very unhealthy state to operate from. And again, my concern, or one of my concerns about living with low self-esteem, is that if you don't have enough self-love, that you can easily give up your devotional practices because you don't think you're worth it. I'm so low, it's not worth it. Who cares? My mother never cared. My father never cared. My brothers don't care. Nobody cares about me, so why should I care about myself? Right? So I chant, I don't chant, who cares? I'm not that valuable, it doesn't matter. Now, I'm sure all of you have thought, why would Krishna care about me? After all, I left him. So, what does he have to do with me? Not only did I leave him, but he's got a lot of good friends to hang out with, so he doesn't really need me. Right? I mean, if I were his only friend and I left him, okay, maybe he would care. Right? But why would he care? He's got a lot of friends and they love him more than I love him. I don't even love him. So why would he care about me? And I'm out here in the material world trying to have a good time. And if I can have a good time with Krishna, I'm okay. Isn't it true? Like, if you could have a good time without Krishna, you probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, would you? Raise your hand if you'd be sitting here, if you could enjoy without Krishna. No. Right? So it's easy to think that Krishna doesn't care about me. Why would he care about me? But I have some news for you. He does. He cares about every one of us. Even you don't care about him, he cares about you. And don't ever think that I am so low, so dirty, so sinful, so wretched, so worthless, that although Krishna cares about everybody, he definitely doesn't care about me. That's low self-esteem on steroids. Isn't it? And if you think like that, it's very difficult to engage in devotional service. Yes? You agree? Mm-hmm. Now we have this problem. I've done something wrong, and I can't forgive myself. That goes along with the low self-esteem. Can't forgive myself. And if you can't forgive yourself, what happens? Not forgiving yourself is like tying your neck with a rope up to a tree and you can't go anywhere. Because until you forgive yourself, you don't set yourself free. So sometimes when a devotee does something wrong, the devotee has to tell himself, I forgive you. Isn't that interesting? You actually have to tell yourself, I forgive you for what you've done. I'm sorry, and I forgive you. Because if you don't forgive yourself, you handicap yourself. You can't move. Because if you don't forgive yourself, then why try to do anything? Because you don't deserve it. So if you feel you're unworthy, why would you forgive yourself? Because you're not worthy of being forgiven. And if you don't forgive yourself, then you're just tied up. Isn't it? If you don't forgive yourself, what do? You berate yourself. You beat yourself up. You condemn yourself. Isn't it? You're so bad you did this. I don't forgive you. Wow, that's like imprisonment. You imprison yourself. You won't even forgive yourself for what you've done.
But sometimes it may be very grave mistake we might have done.
Yes. Still, if you do it every day, that's a different thing. If you've done it once, if you don't forgive yourself, okay, look at it this way. You're here, we're all here, Krishna's here. Krishna wants us to get to here. If I don't forgive myself, I stay here. Krishna wants me here. I have to forgive myself so I can free myself to get here. So forgiving myself would please Krishna because it would bring me to him. So we do everything which will help us get to Krishna, right? And we do everything to help us please Krishna. So not forgiving yourself will not please him because it will keep you away from him. Because it will handicap you and bind you. Does that make sense? So it's not a moral judgment of right and wrong. It's a judgment of what will be the best for our Krishna consciousness. So you've done something wrong, forgive yourself and then go forward. If you don't forgive yourself, you stay down. We give this example. It's a very funny example. Maybe I've given it here before. A man is walking, nice suit and tie, it's a rainy day, and he slips and he falls in the gutter. And he gets completely wet and muddy. And he's laying in the gutter and he's saying, I'm such an idiot. I wasn't watching where I was going and I slipped and fell in the gutter. But he still lays in the gutter. And he's continuing to talk to himself. And this suit, I ruined this. This is a brand new suit. It's silk. And I ruined it. I am such an idiot. I hate myself. And it's cold out. And I'm freezing. And now I have to go back home and take off these clothes. I'm going to be late for work. And all the time he's saying this, he's laying in the gutter. He doesn't get up. And naturally, everybody's looking at him thinking, why don't you just get up? Why don't you just shut up, get up, go home, change your clothes, and go to work? Oh, I'm such a fool. I slipped in the gutter. I am such an idiot. I never look where I'm going, etc., etc. And people are thinking, you are crazy. Isn't it? That is a mode of ignorance, right? That's what low self-esteem does to us. We berate ourselves. We put ourselves down. Instead of getting up out of the gutter and taking our clothes off and drying them, we berate ourselves. You're so bad. You're so stupid. You're such a fool. How could you do that? That's not a healthy state of consciousness, is it? It's the mode of ignorance. That's what happens in the mode of ignorance. Mode of ignorance is madness, it's lethargy. And so when you're stuck and you can't move out of it, that's the mode of ignorance. Does that make sense? So it's something so simple that we miss so often. You're caught up, let's say you're caught up in this situation. So I just can't forgive myself. And my point is, you should forgive yourself because that will please Krishna, because that will help you in your Krishna consciousness. And sometimes we get caught up in these states of consciousness where we're afraid to do something, or we're handicapped to do it Where the simple solution is just do it because it'll please Krishna. That's the answer. It's like, oh, I have low self-esteem, I can't. No, 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 that doesn't help you. Get over it because it doesn't please Krishna. The way you're thinking is not pleasing to Krishna because it's inhibiting your devotional service. Isn't that a simple way of thinking? I can't forgive myself. It doesn't matter. You have to because it'll please Krishna, because it'll help you become Krishna conscious. No, but I have low self-esteem, I think. No, don't think that way. It's harming your devotional service. It's keeping you away from Krishna. You can't please him. Right? So simple. One devotee said, I don't know how to forgive. Simple answer. Do it to please Krishna. That's what he wants. Couldn't be simpler than that, right? Okay, it's easier said than done. But I said yesterday, whatever identity you have, you'll act it out. So if a pure devotee thinks, I'm lower than a worm and stool, he'll act out love of Krishna. And if you think you're lower than a worm and stool, you'll act like a madman. And you'll inhibit yourself. Because if I'm lower than the worm and stool, why try to be Krishna conscious? That's how we'll think, right? So it's not pleasing to Krishna. You want to act in a way that's pleasing. So why don't we take some questions or discussions or direct me in what you want me to speak about? Yes?
When we see ourselves in a certain way,
Yes.
in a negative way, so will that also affect the way we look at other people?
We see ourselves in a negative way. Will it affect the way we see other people? Well, there is a tendency to notice your own faults in other people. That's one thing. Anything that upsets you personally, that you're not purifying yourself of, it will bother you when you see it in another person. For example, let's say you want to go on a diet. And it's really hard. And your wife says, I'll go on the diet with you. And then she breaks it. That's going to really bother you because you want to break it also. And you're having a hard time doing it. And if she breaks it, it upsets you. Right? Now, if you're not on a diet, you don't need to go on a diet, and she doesn't follow a good diet, it doesn't bother you at all. Because it's not an issue for you. Have you noticed that in your life? That the things that you have issues with, that other people are not doing, it bothers you? Because you're bothered by it personally. It bothers you when you see other people with it, because it reminds you that you have that fault also. Have you noticed that? Have you ever heard the saying, if you spot it, you got it? You tend to notice the faults in others that you have. And another aspect of your question. What was the question? If we don't...
If we see something negative in ourselves, does it...
Or affect, oh yeah. If we see something negative in ourselves, does it affect the way we... Yeah. I would say as a general principle, anything negative in ourselves is going to manifest negatively in some way. Whatever that negativity is, that's going to manifest in a negative way that we deal with other people. And we want to positively encourage people. And it's really hard to positively encourage people when we're negative ourselves, because we're going to tend to see negative in them because we're negative. You know, like, there's a state of consciousness you have to be in to help people be Krishna conscious, and that's a state of acceptance. You have to be able to accept where people are at. And I don't think negative people can do that. Because when people aren't at a certain standard, it upsets negative people. Why are you doing that? You're supposed to be here, but you're here. Positive people are more accepting, and that means they're more self-accepting. Not self-accepting in a negative way, but just accepting their own weaknesses and working on them but not beating themselves up because they have a fault. If you beat yourself up because you have a fault, you'll tend to beat other people up when they have faults, right? That's why Prabhupada said, strict with yourself, lenient with others. But you have to be strict with yourself in a positive way. I would say, as far as negativity, it's destructive in so many ways. It's not a productive energy. It's a draining energy. Yes?
Once we feel guilty itself, we will be able to find ourselves low. So how do we overcome that? Because man feels that he is lower or, is like spiritually not able to balance. That's because only then he fails to do certain acts. So if he is feeling low, is it that he wants to come up, so overcome that thing and make it up?
It may be, when you feel low, it could be, you could be on your way up or you could be on your way down. That's why we have the word remorse. Because remorse means you feel low, but you've connected the mistake with a part of you that wants to correct it. So the guilt becomes the impetus to correct it. That's more, you could say that's more like a sattvic way of dealing with failure. You recognize the failure, you feel bad that you failed, but you don't feel bad enough that you don't do something to improve. Right? So, if you didn't feel bad, then how would you improve? Because you wouldn't recognize you've done anything wrong. So you have to recognize you've done something wrong. And the way that you will feel better is to correct yourself and do the right thing. Then you'll feel good. Right?
In connection with this, I have heard your lecture by saying that 32 ways of not chanting.
Yeah.
It's not practically applicable, I feel, because there are like 32 ways which we regularly do it.
Do it wrong. The wrong ways, yeah.
Wrong way of chanting.
Yeah, yeah.
So initially we preach people saying that you can chant like, there are no rules as such to chanting. But when we hear this 32 ways of not chanting, it's not practically applicable. So how do I overcome this?
You overcome the belief that it's not practical.
Majority of the people does this with 32
Yeah.
ways
Yeah.
majority fails to perform this.
Yeah. Don't be part of the majority.
That's not practically
Don't say it's not practical. Because the more you say it's not practical, then you'll never be able to do it. It is practical. The reason we listed those 32 ways is so that you wouldn't chant any of those 32 ways. Not so you'd acknowledge that those are the ways everyone does it. You know what Prabhupada said in the Bhagavad Gita? He said, when you become a devotee, you're declaring war on Maya. So if you say, this is the only way I can do it, it's kind of like you're saying, I've just been shot by Maya's weapons and I can't defend myself. No, you have to. You have to always know that you can. And that's a very important realization, to know you have the power to come out of that to something better. See, the thing is, if you can do better and you don't, then you're always going to feel bad. Or if you can do better and you say, I can't, you'll always feel bad. And then when you feel bad, you have no energy to do good. That's the problem. If you make an effort to do better, even if it's not perfect, you will feel better because you're making the effort and you'll get energy. And gradually you'll improve over time. Maybe it'll take you 10 years, but you'll get there, little by little. And that will give you positive energy. See, the problem is, we all know the problem. The problem is when you become a devotee, in the beginning you don't have a lot of taste, right? So you've given up your material taste and now you haven't replaced it. So if you don't do the process well, you don't get the taste. And then if you don't get the taste, naturally you'll commit all the mistakes in chanting. Right? So we have to realize that the taste exists within a more strict application of the practice. So a lot of people take the Krishna consciousness, but they don't take it strictly enough to get the taste. And then they're just caught struggling because they have no impetus. That's a very dangerous place to be. So you don't want to be there. You want to make effort. You want to make your best effort. And no matter how difficult it is, don't give in. And don't say, I can't. Because you can. And if you ask Krishna tonight, Krishna, show me how I can avoid these 32 mistakes. He'll show you. You have Krishna within you. That's it. Isn't that amazing? You remember years ago, I don't know if you remember this, we had a japa retreat, or japa workshop here. And in part of the japa workshop, I was saying that everyone has their own Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna's inside. So everyone's got their own Krishna telling them what to do. So if you want to improve, you'll be Arjuna, and he'll give you instructions necessary. What do you think? Yeah, so don't ever say, I can't. Always say, by Krishna's mercy, I can. If I want, if I pray and get his help. Now the thing is, as far as guilt, you can't overcome guilt unless you act properly. And if you continually act improperly, you'll continually feel guilty. In modern psychology, they have this phenomenon in modern psychology, which is really crazy. They'll say something like, don't feel guilty, just feel good. So they're telling you to feel good even though you're not acting properly. When reality is, if you act properly, you'll feel good. So to act improperly and feel good is kind of weird, don't you think? Yeah, I don't really chant that much, and I really don't do much Krishna consciousness, but, I read popular psychology books. So I'm a really positive person, I really feel good, Yeah, you should feel bad that you're not doing it. That's wrong that you feel good. That's just psyching yourself up. You should feel good about acting properly. Right? Yeah. Yes, sir.
If we get affected by thinking that what others will think whenever we're doing something, so is that low self-esteem?
Could be. He's asking, what if I'm so concerned about what others think about me? It could be low self-esteem or borderline. Pride could enter there as well. Need to be recognized. False ego. I have a funny story. There's a devotee, he used to sleep a lot, right? So, one time I knocked on the door to his room. Jagannath Swami, ki jai. And, I'm knocking, and it's taking a while for him to come to the door, So he opens the door. You could tell he was sleeping, and he has a book. And as soon as he opened the door, he said, I wasn't sleeping. So he was so concerned about people. That's why he had the book, it looked like he was reading. He was so concerned that everyone was always talking about how he sleeps so much. And then Prabhupada said, someone's in your house. Who's there? I'm not stealing. The thief is there. I'm not stealing. Prabhu, how you doing? I didn't do it. That means you did it. I didn't ask if you did it. You just told me by telling me you didn't. What else? Yes.
So, you said you should forgive ourselves, but for how long can we continue to keep forgiving
Oh yeah, very good question. Or we could reframe the question. What if I keep doing the same thing wrong? What should I do then? Stop doing the same thing wrong. This is an interesting question because on one hand, it's wrong to continually forgive yourself and continually do the same thing wrong. It's like committing sin on the strength of chanting. On the other hand, if you don't forgive yourself, how are you going to overcome the problem, right? So I think a key element here is that you're making an effort to improve. And so you have to at least be somewhat happy that you're trying, that you're making an effort, and you could say somewhat proud of that I'm trying, I'm working on it, maybe confident that someday I'll succeed and I'm not going to give up. And then you can forgive yourself. But if you don't even care, then forgiving yourself would be, like I said, feeling good about doing something bad. It's like taking a drug. That would be wrong. So, have you ever heard the saying, you judge a man by his ideals? So that means that you're not judging him by where he's at now, but you're judging him by where he's going, or where he's looking to go. So if you're honestly looking to go to a higher place and you're not there, you can judge yourself based on that. And that's my desire. That way you can forgive yourself. That I'm acting in this way, but I don't want to, and my goal is something greater. But if you don't care, then forgiving yourself it doesn't make sense. Better you don't forgive yourself. Maybe that will help you. Is that okay? Yes. You had a question. Anand has a question.
Finding fault in others out of concern, does it affect us in any way, or is it a kind of reflection of our own self?
Finding fault, it's both. It has a very negative effect. And it's a reflection of our own consciousness. That there's something... Generally, fault-finding reflects something that inside of us that we feel uncertain about. Like, let's say, someone's very intelligent and you find fault with them because you're doubting your own intelligence, and that person is making you feel uncomfortable because they're so smart. And you might feel that you're not smart and you don't like being around smart people, and the only way you can deal with it is by telling everybody they're not as smart as they think they are. That makes you feel better. Then you don't feel so stupid. Does that make sense?
In case of a person finding fault in a negative manner, but there are cases where there are obvious faults in other people.
Okay, all right, let's deal with obvious faults. Okay. If there are, objectively, there are faults in another person, and we point them out, does it have a negative effect on us? If there is no redeeming value in pointing it out, like it's not going to correct anything, it's not your place to point it out, you're not in a position to do anything about it, it will have a negative effect on you. And in fact, sometimes the fault that you focus on will infect you because of your focus on it. It'll come back and infect you.
So in this case, the best thing to do is just keep quiet.
There's better things to do than keeping quiet, but that's part of it, yeah. You could glorify the person. You don't have to keep quiet. You can appreciate the person for their good quality. See, if I'm focused on a fault, it's a focus on something negative. If I'm focused on a good quality, it's focused on something good. Now, if you focus on something negative, it's going to make you negative. If you focus on something positive, it'll make you positive. So a lot of times what happens is we get infected by the person's fault because we focus on the negative, and it disturbs us. It upsets, so we get all upset. the more we focus on it. So even though it's true, but by focusing on it, it has a bad effect on us, because it's a negative. Right? Does that make sense?
Being close to that person, for example, in a job or
Yeah.
in a family,
Yes.
that is very much affecting
Yes.
the person is not correcting himself.
Yes.
Somebody has to build a cat.
Still, you have to accept that that's how the person is. Because you don't want to spend the rest of your life thinking about that person. So, that's the catch. When you focus on a person's fault, sometimes that's worse than the fault. You know, okay, you have a fault, I'm focused on it. Now I'm at fault by focusing on your fault. So your fault made me at fault because I focused on it. He's not focused on your fault. So he just thinks you're a nice guy. So, but because I'm focused on your fault, I get affected by that. So your fault becomes my fault because I'm focused on your fault. So that's the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but a teacher has a responsible role to play, right?
Yeah, if you're a teacher, that's different. But if it's your mother-in-law, you know, you're not going to get anywhere with that. You'll just get more and more in trouble. So you have to be able to discriminate the redeeming value. Okay, if it's a student and the student is doing something which is detrimental to him or to the class, yeah, it's your duty to point it out. But I wouldn't call that fault finding. I would just call that your job, and you're correcting. But when we say fault finding, I like to look at it as unnecessarily focusing on a fault. Now let's say you're a teacher and you correct that student, and then you go home all night thinking about how horrible that student is. Then it becomes fault finding. Because now it's affecting you. It's making you very negative. And maybe tomorrow you'll be very angry with that student. Because his fault built up anger inside of you. Does that make sense? Radhika, you had a question? Yeah.
What if the environment is very pushing down in a school or in a job or somewhere, and it kind of pushes down someone's low self-esteem? So how do we guard it?
What do? Get another job. You don't, especially, I mean, if a person has low self-esteem, they really need to be around people who lift them up. That's the best thing for them. And a person with low self-esteem, if they're around people that are putting them down, that's a very bad environment for them. They really need people to uplift them. So, I'm serious. If you have low self-esteem and you're around people putting you down, you have to be distant from them or put earplugs in, because it's going to damage you, because it's not what you need to hear. And then you'll say, well, I can't leave that situation. Then I would say, just don't listen to them, don't believe them. Because if someone's putting you down, that means they have a problem. That means probably they have low self-esteem also, and they have to pull you down so they don't feel bad. Right? So if you see it that way, you might be able to tolerate it. And think, they're trying to feel good by putting me down. That's how they feel good. And they're not in a healthy state if that makes them feel good. Right? If somebody feels good by putting someone else down, something's wrong with that person. And so if you understand that, it won't affect you so much. And they go, okay, put me down if that makes you feel good. If I can be of service to you, put me down, it makes you feel good, okay. It's useful if you can see it that way, because then it's easier to take, that you don't take it personally. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's putting you down and you realize that it's not me, it's just anyone who's standing in front of them will get put down, because that's what they do. So, it could have been the person next to me, but I just happened to be in front of them, so I got it. So it's not about me personally. So sometimes you can understand that. It's not about you, it has nothing to do with you. It's about them, they need to put somebody down, and you just happen to be there. And they're expressing their frustration. Right? Does that make sense? Wouldn't it be nice to be in a position where people could say anything to us? And we just stay in the same consciousness. Samatva bhava. That's what Krishna talks about. Jayo jayo. Jaya jayo. Whether you win, whether you lose. Sukha dukkeshu. We got to speak. Whether you're happy, whether you're sad. Victory or defeat. Loss or gain. Labha labha. Whether you gain, whether you lose. Wouldn't that be an amazing state to be in? You're so fixed in Krishna consciousness, nothing bothers you. Nothing disrupts you. You know, Krishna says in the Gita, there's another verse, he's equal when he's with Surit, well-wishers, Mitra, friends, the neutral, the ones who don't like him. You know, this is all because you have all kinds of people. You have friends, you have well-wishers, you have people who, I don't care what happens to you. You have people that do care. They want to make your life miserable. Right? You have all kinds of people. And Krishna says, he's equal to all. So that's the state we want to come to. And unfortunately, we take people's words too seriously. They crack our hearts. And Krishna's saying, don't be bothered by it. Right? So I like to see it as their problem, not my problem. You know, there's a certain race of people that was created with the internet who like to go on the internet and say bad things about people. You know, that class of people? Now, if you spend the rest of your life on the internet saying bad things about people, there must be something a little wrong with you. You must be somewhat frustrated about something. Must be somewhat angry about something. It's just not normal. So, and then, you know, it's your turn and that person says something bad about you. So what do you think? You're going to get back on the internet and say bad things about him and get in a debate? Hopefully not. Samatvam, equal. That's what we have to learn. Right? Yeah. What else? Yes.
Whenever we commit a mistake, it is that we need to repent. So the understanding of our repentance is like sometimes we feel low esteem. But what is the right way of understanding how exactly the repentance has to be?
How do we repent? Well, the best way to repent is don't make the mistake again. Have you ever heard the saying? The best apology are right actions in the future. So, okay, you did something wrong, and then you apologize. And the person's like, yeah, right, you're going to do it again. That's what. You apologize because you want to get off the hook so you can do it again. You ever feel like that when someone apologizes? You feel like, yeah, they're just trying to get off the hook. Right? So therefore, the best apology is right actions in the future. You never do that again, but you do the opposite. You do what's right. That's the best apology. So, what's the best apology for namaparad? Stop committing namaparad. That's the instruction, right? The solution for namaparad is to chant without namaparad. So it's the same principle. The best apology is right actions in the future. Oh, Harinam Prabhu, I'm so sorry I chanted namaparad. Shnik, shnik, ram, ram, shnik. And then I, continue. And I'm still sorry while I'm shnicking, I'm still sorry that I'm shnicking. That's not the mentality. The mentality is stop shnicking and start chanting. Right?
From the point of view of the ideals what we speak in the Vaishnava Dharma, there are two aspects. One is that of being a sadhu or becoming a sadhu.
Yes.
Another is being in the mundane world.
Yeah.
So like participating in the day-to-day life.
Well, you know what I say?
So in such case, when a person is trying to be dominating,
Yes.
either we go for a confrontation or we get cancelled as a thief.
Well, you know, look at Bhagavad Gita. It wasn't spoken to a sadhu. I like to say Bhagavad Gita was the first corporate workshop. It was spoken at Arjuna's office. And his office is the battlefield. And that's the whole point why Krishna chose Arjuna. Because Arjuna wasn't a sadhu. And he was preaching to him at the office. So he was showing him that you have to be sadhu-like in all your actions. You know, look what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Be a friend to everyone, see everyone equally, don't be disturbed by happiness and distress. Don't create any distress for anyone. He's speaking to a warrior, a family man and a warrior, not a renunciate. And that's the point. So that instruction of the Gita, I think the mistake we make, it's kind of like it's easy to think that those instructions of the Gita are like meant for people in an ashram or meant for a sadhu. But actually, it's meant for every point in our life. It's meant for us. And if you study the Gita that way, you'll see. And if we don't act as a sadhu in every situation, then we're not actually imbibing what Krishna wants us, or what Krishna's teaching us.
In fact, Arjuna wants to become a sadhu and he pulls him out of that mold and makes him a kshatriya.
Well, he already is a kshatriya, and so it wasn't his position to be a Brahmin, but he was surrendering to Krishna by doing his dharma. So he was still being a sadhu. That's the point. So it wasn't that he wasn't being a sadhu, but he was being a sadhu within the kshatriya dharma. Or it depends how you define sadhu, but he was fully surrendered to Krishna. So that's the meaning of sadhu, right? You know, just think of this idea. I think it's an important idea. Look at the qualities of a devotee. And most of the qualities of a devotee are qualities that you exhibit in relation to other people, like kindness or tolerance, patience, forgiveness, friendliness, and so forth. Generally, most of the time, those qualities are exhibited in relation to people, right? And Krishna's asking us to live by those qualities. So that means every time you have an interaction with another person is an opportunity to live by those qualities, to exhibit those characteristics. So therefore, it can't mean that Krishna is just speaking for some sadhu in an ashram, because we have to exhibit those qualities in all our dealings, don't we? Like every time you act with another person, there's a possibility you might become intolerant, unkind, resentful, angry. And Krishna is saying, control all these things, because these are the interactions. So every interaction is an opportunity to practice the Bhagavad Gita. That's the way I look at it. Every interaction is a practice of spiritual life. But somehow or other, many of us don't see it that way. And I think we don't see it that way because we think it's such a high ideal that it must not be for the average person. But why did Krishna speak to Arjuna? Because he was, quote unquote, the average person. That's the idea. You know what happened in Christianity? Christ gave his teachings and he lived those teachings, but nobody could live on that level. So they say that nobody's perfect, nobody can live like Christ, and therefore you're all forgiven of your sins because you're imperfect. So they rationalize the philosophy. So we don't want to do that. No, we can live on that. We can live on that level. It'll take time. But when we're purified, we can live on that level. So I find that Krishna consciousness, it's available at every moment, because every moment you're dealing with people. You're dealing with situations. You're tempted, right? You can become angry, become greedy, lusty, envious. Who do we become envious? Of an ant, a cow? No, a person who has more than we do. So every time you confront a person who has what you want, there's a chance to practice Krishna consciousness by controlling your envy. Every time something happens that's not the way you wanted it, it's a chance to practice tolerance. And so this world gives us so many chances to practice Bhagavad Gita, doesn't it? Like almost at every moment there's a chance to practice something. So in that sense it's good. You know that story? It's a fairy tale story of a little boy, like 6 years old. So he meets an angel. Then the angel says, this life, he said, you are a reflection of God, and you have all the qualities of God. And in this life, the angel said, what quality would you like to experience? And so the little boy said, I would like to experience forgiveness. So the angel said, okay, I'm going to reincarnate and come back as your enemy. And the boy was taken back by that. He said, well, why would you come back as my enemy? You're an angel. He said, well, if you want to forgive, you need an enemy. If there's no enemy, who are you going to forgive? So I'm going to come back as your enemy, and then you can learn to forgive. So if you see it in that way, then everything negative in the world is just an opportunity to practice something in the Bhagavad Gita. And all the people that are nasty and all the people that mess you up, and they're all just helping you follow Krishna's teachings. And if you didn't have them, then how, if there's nothing to tolerate, how could you practice tolerance? No one to forgive, who are you going to forgive? I heard this lecture today. This Swami was saying, Jesus said, love thy neighbor. And he said, I didn't like that. I thought that was wrong. You should love the whole world. And then he said, then I realized what Jesus said. It's easy to love the world, but it's hard to love your neighbor. Or your wife, or your husband, or your son, or your daughter. Yeah. It's easy to love someone you never met, right? Yeah, I love everybody. I have compassion for the world, yeah. Well, then when you meet them, yeah. So, I like to think that way. That's helped me a lot in my life. To look at the negative situations as just opportunities to practice Krishna consciousness. And I think it's a huge mistake if we don't think that way. Because if we don't think that way, then we think at the temple we practice Krishna consciousness, and outside we don't. And that's not true. Because it's 24 hours. Like Krishna, when he gives his instructions, right? He doesn't give you a time frame. This instruction to be followed between 4 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Sunday. It doesn't say that, right? And I think we make that mistake, don't we? Oh yeah, this is instruction. When you go to the temple, when you go to Vrindavan, when you go to a festival, these are the instructions. But when you're at home, just kick back, and whatever. When you're at work, you can't be humble at work. They'll all walk over you. And this, I hear this so many times, the most humble people are the most powerful. So, we misunderstand things. Jesus did pretty good, right? He was pretty humble. He was pretty successful. Prabhupada was pretty humble. He's pretty successful, right? The most humble people are the most successful people.
But Prabhupada did not hesitate to use the word rascal.
That's because he was humble. Because he was protecting Krishna from the rascals. You had something?
If the person is of the type that you mentioned, nasty and really messing up somebody's life, and mind trying to focus on the good qualities of that person, or trying to practice the virtues that we're talking about, is encouraging the other person to continue, carrying out the damage that the person is causing me. So how do I handle that?
Well, okay. This is a good question. First, I would like to define humility by saying that when Arjuna wanted to be a sadhu and a Brahmin and not fight, that was not humility. And when Arjuna picked up his weapon and started killing people, that was humility. Now, why do I say that? simply because Krishna wanted him to fight, and so when he didn't fight and disobeyed Krishna and acted like a sadhu, that was pride, because he was acting independently. When he picked up his weapon and fought, which seems like pride or passion, that's when he was being humble, because he was following Krishna's instruction. So, if we define humility as following Krishna's instruction, then if as Anand said, sometimes Prabhupada called people rascals, but that meant that he was being humble, because he was defending Krishna. And Krishna calls them rascals also. And when Prabhupada called someone a rascal, it wasn't coming from some kind of false ego. So, often I tell people, I say, if you're at the workplace and you're being paid to do something, that's your job. If you're employed by someone, that's the occupation of a Shudra. And one of the qualities of a Shudra is dedication to their master. So if I'm being paid to work for somebody, I have a job to execute. And if you're getting in my way, I have to make sure you get out of my way, out of my duty to my master, the CEO or the company that's paying for me. So to move you out of the way because you're getting in the way of my service is my humility to my superior, isn't it? So it doesn't look like humility, but it is. Because that's what I'm being paid to do, and you're interfering with it by telling me all these crazy things that I don't need to hear. Right? So it's just a matter of how you define humility. And that's an important position, important thing to understand. That's your dharma as an employee of the company to do your service, and if someone gets in the way, you're nice to them, but you have to prevent them from creating problems for you. Right?
How do I deal with that person on a practical level? Do I keep away from that person, or do I talk it out?
Depends on the person. Give them a few prasadam cookies and then talk. Usually get more mileage that way. Some people are talkable, some aren't. But again, it's a test of your equanimity, that you can remain neutral even though the person is disturbing. The thing that's worked best for me is always understanding trying to understand what's disturbing that person. Because there's a saying that every action we do is either a call for being loved or a call or an act of giving love. So a lot of times when people are upset, they're actually calling out for love and affection, and if you see that, you can cater to that or minister to that. And it can change things. Or at least if you can't help them, at least you understand it's their frustration. And they're really crying out to be heard or seen or appreciated or something. It's always nice to know the simple truth that in every bad relationship you ever had, you were there. In case you didn't notice. Is that true? In every bad relationship you ever had, you were there. You were in that bad relationship. So we all have some responsibility for bad relationship. Now, if you want to be a superhero, you can take 100% responsibility for every bad relationship you have and then see what you can do to make it better. That's a very high level of thinking. I mean, you can try that out, see what happens. I'm going to take 100% responsibility for this horrible relationship. What can I do now? Why is it my responsibility? It doesn't seem like it, but I'm going to try to figure it out. That's amazing, isn't it? Do you know that everyone in this room is responsible for the price of petrol? Did you know that? Did you know you're responsible for it? Did anyone ever tell you that? You want me to prove it? If everyone in Bangalore either rode a bike or drove an electric car, what would happen to the price of petrol? It would be cheaper than water, right? Actually, petrol in the UAE is cheaper than water. Do you know that? It's like 25 cents a liter or something. Whatever that is. 25 cents is like what? 10 rupees or something. So every one of us is responsible for the price of petrol, because we ride in buses, ride in cars, on motorcycles, fly in airplanes. And if we all stopped, the price of petrol would crash. Yes? We're all responsible for the high prices of rent, because if we all moved out into the country, the prices would go down. Supply and demand. So if you want to take responsibility, you have to start thinking in those terms in a broad way. How can I take responsibility? And then the ultimate responsibility is, sometimes it's hard to see, well, you decided to work in that job, so you're responsible. And beyond that, you decided to take a material body. So stop complaining. If you didn't decide to take a material body, you wouldn't have any of these problems. So in that sense, every problem you have, you're responsible for, because you got the body that's creating the problems. Right? I'm on the freeway, on the motorway, and somebody crashes into me. It's his fault, right? Well, what's your responsibility? If you weren't on the freeway, he wouldn't crash into you. Right? So you bought a car, you decided to drive it, and someone crashed into you. So it's partially your responsibility, because with no car, there's nothing to crash into. Right? Did you ever think like that? That's responsibility. My husband cheated on me. It's your responsibility. Why? Were you stupid enough to marry the dumb idiot? Shouldn't have married him in the first place, so it's your fault. Right? So if you want to take responsibility, you can figure out some way I'm responsible. Right? Does that make sense? Yes?
Just now you were mentioning about we have every opportunity to basically
Yeah. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice.
relationship.
Yes.
We should rightly do it, I agree with you. But more we do that, it will happen that our esteem will go down.
Why?
How do we manage that?
Why?
Because we always think that I'm wrong. That when we have an opportunity that I have to learn, or
Okay. All right.
always I think I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, so he's saying that if we recognize that we're at fault, maybe I'm being intolerant or angry, and I want to deal with that, and I recognize it, then my self-esteem will go down. You're saying by recognizing my weakness, by recognizing my fault, my self-esteem will go down. If you're self-accepting, it won't. If you accept that I'm a human being, I have these flaws, and I'm working to improve, then you shouldn't allow those flaws to make you feel bad. I would say, to me, the only time I think we should feel bad is when we don't try to improve ourselves. If I'm not trying to improve, then you should feel bad. But if you recognize a fault, that shouldn't make you feel bad. It should actually, in a sense, make you feel good, because now I know what to work on. Like, if you don't know you have a fault, how will you know what to work on? So recognizing a fault could actually make you feel good, because now I know, hey, I didn't realize I had this fault, now I know, now I can work on it. Like I could tell you something wrong with you, and you could get upset, or you could say, thank you, I didn't know that was wrong with me, but now that you pointed it out, I can work on it. So I appreciate that. If you take it personally, it's only because we have low self-esteem that we would take it personally. So you think, oh, I'm so intolerant, that means I'm bad. That's low self-esteem. Every time you notice a fault, it means you're bad, instead of noticing the fault as something to work on to improve and being positive. You understand? So if we feel low, then what you say is true. then everything we notice that's bad about ourselves makes us feel worse, as opposed to noticing it's just something to work on. You know, you ever heard the saying, when things get tough, the tough get going? You ever heard that? You know, so it's the same thing. You know, now that I notice something's wrong with me, then I'm going to work on it. So I become energized to work on it, as opposed to collapsing. You know, so the weak, when things get tough, the weak collapse. So if what you say is something that you notice about yourself, that means there's some low self-esteem there. And so you can be aware of that. That's a sign, you know, why am I feeling so bad? I should just take it as information and then work on it. You know, a positive person, a person without low self-esteem would think, this is good that I know this, because now I can work on it. Right? Does that make sense? What else? Yes, sir.
You said that our first duty is to become pure and go back to God.
Yeah.
And
First
then
duty is become Krishna conscious, yes.
Then there is other side of showing compassion on others and preaching.
Yes.
And we always tend to move to the extremes of either side. So how do we strike the balance?
Oh, the balance. This is interesting. The balance between saving yourself and saving others. If you save yourself, automatically you'll save others. Because when people see you, they'll become Krishna conscious. How can you save others if you're not Krishna conscious? If you haven't saved yourself, how can you save anybody? If you don't love yourself, how can you love anybody? That's the point. And don't think that the main thing in helping people is my tongue, what I say. It's not. The tongue is a manifestation of your consciousness. So it's your consciousness that's the most important thing. Who you are is what's important. Who you are is what affects people. And your words will be manifestation of who you are. Right?
So when we are trying to save ourselves, we are on the path of saving ourselves, but we are not perfected. So
Should we save others if we haven't saved ourselves? Saving others is one of the ways you save yourself. Because we need to give Krishna to others. That helps us. What you give, you get. So we need to give it. Right? Right? You agree? There's millions of people watching right now. You want to see the audience? All these happy faces here. You want to see the faces of all these happy men? You know why they're happy? They're not married yet. And the faces of all the women who got married to the wrong men. The story of ISKCON. Hare Krishna. I could be fired by the GBC for saying that. I can't be fired because they didn't hire me. I'm safe. Yes, you have a question?
Regarding low self-esteem, so like because we are human beings and we are limited, so a human being cannot have experience of all the experiences that are available.
Okay.
So because of that, like some seniors, they may comment something about us, ki this thing you are doing is not right. But in fact, that may be something that I really like to do, and some other seniors appreciate it. But some influential seniors or some seniors who are like source of inspiration for us, for our Shiksha Gurus, sometimes if they say, then self-esteem will go down.
Oh, okay.
Such situations.
He's saying that sometimes you do something that some seniors appreciate and some people that you respect as your Shiksha Gurus don't appreciate, and then it makes you feel bad, and your self-esteem goes down, right? But it depends how you take it. I say that you have to have some insecurity inside for that to happen. Because otherwise you could just take it as advice, right? Or caution, or guidance, or good instruction, or something that's clarifying the situation. So, if you're too dependent on the glorification and respect of seniors, then when you don't get it, it'll make you feel that way.
Like I feel it's more of a rejection.
Yeah, but you should understand it's not the way that's not the way they meant it, but it's the way you're feeling it, and because that's what they say the problem with the millennials are. Millennials are everyone who's born between like 1985 and 2000, because they got spoiled. That everyone should love me. And if someone doesn't love me, then I can't deal with it, you know. So, and you may be, a senior may say something different from another senior, and you can take it as, well, that's how he sees it. Sometimes you have to take it that way. Well, some people see it that way, some people don't. I have to think about it, whether that actually applies to me or not. But if you take it personally, that's a sign that you're becoming dependent on the honor of a senior person. And that's not unusual or wrong, but it can be if it's too strong. If it's too strong, it can be a problem. If you can take everything feedback in a positive way to use it, like I also get feedback. I ask people they give me feedback about things that I do. And then I have to look at it. And some of the feedback I get is really good. And some of it I just don't think it's accurate. It doesn't relate to me. And so I just have to say, no, I don't think it's like that. It doesn't make sense to me.
You said about giving Krishna to others, but here there is a kind of argument tendency in others. So should we actually get into the argument and not on, or when it comes to argument we should just give away?
Only get into argument with those you can defeat. Otherwise, it might just be fun for your ego to argue, but it's not really useful. You know, there might be somebody that just has the wrong idea, and you know the right idea, and you can convince him. But generally, the mood of a devotee is if people want to argue, then just let them argue. Especially if I don't think they're willing to hear, then there's no really utility in speaking to them, because every moment you speak to them, you're wasting time that could be used to speak to someone who will actually listen. And that's a Vaishnava principle also. Speak to the innocent, avoid the envious and atheist. No, sometimes you have to speak. Like I might be doing a public program and someone challenges me and I can't say, I don't want to talk to you. Because, I have to talk. But if it was on the street, I might just say, that's okay, you don't have to believe, no problem. And talk to somebody else. A lot of times, like in a public gathering, if you're speaking to a person who has no faith, and you're not actually speaking to him, you're speaking to the audience because he asked a question, and you know he's not going to accept the answer, but you're giving the answer for those who will accept it. So you don't really care if he accepts it or not, but you're actually giving it for the rest of the audience. So sometimes you'll make that decision. And sometimes when Prabhupada would speak to such people, before he'd answer the question, he would say, so if I tell you this, will you accept it? Like they'll ask a question, have you seen God? And then he'd say, so if I tell you yes, will you accept it? So, testing the water first. Because he'd say, otherwise, Why are you asking the question and wasting our time? But I was thinking the other day, it was kind of interesting that people don't believe in God. So someone says, I don't believe in God, and I would say, what's that God you don't believe in? And they'll say, a God who, punishes people, and a God who creates religious wars, and and I'd say, I don't believe in that God either. So, we're on the same page. Because when someone says, I don't believe in God, I have to ask them, well, what's the God you don't believe in? And generally, we don't believe in that God either. Isn't it? Quite often, so. And then I say, well, you believe in nature? Like the universe is controlled, nature controls. And they'll say, yeah. I say, you call it nature, I call it God. It's the same thing. It's just you have a different way of looking at it. But there is a force out there that's controlling. The sun is rising every day and setting. There's some force. You call it nature, I call it God. Different name for the same thing. What else? Yes, sir.
How to deal with the situation which is beyond our control, but still has emotional turmoil on us.
Situation that's beyond our control but has emotional turmoil, for example.
Like losing someone near dear ones, or a broken relationship, or something.
A relationship that breaks up, that we can't control. I think there's only one way to deal with it. To accept that it has happened, and there's nothing we can do about it now. And just allow ourselves to suffer through it and move forward. And, be strong. Because what I see, one of the most difficult, what causes one of the greatest difficulties for people is to go through a situation that they can't control, it's past. So obviously it's already happened, so you can't control it. And to not accept it. Or a situation that they presently can't control, and to not accept it. For example, there's a definition of forgiveness, and one of the definitions is to give up all hope for a better past. So a lot of times we're lamenting, right, about something that happened in the past that we can't control. Isn't it? Yeah. If we can accept, then it's much easier to deal with it. So acceptance is a huge thing. And acceptance is a spiritual principle. Because that means Krishna's in control, not me. Right? Isn't it? I find it so interesting that as devotees, you would think we would be the most accepting people in the world because we understand Krishna is the supreme controller, not us. But it's not necessarily that we are. But philosophically, we should be, shouldn't we? Everything is moving by the will of Krishna. There are things beyond my control. I'm not the supreme controller. This person got in an accident, this loved one left me, and I can't control it. And you would think we would realize that and accept I'm not the controller, but we don't. And it causes a lot of distress. And acceptance is one of the greatest panaceas for distress in this world. You find out a loved one's going to die. Those who are more accepting have the easiest time. Those who are least accepting have the hardest time. Right?
Krishna says that before accepting, you give your best shot and then you accept what the result is.
But he's talking about situations where it's just happening around you. There's nothing you can do. It's something that's totally out of your control. Well, like what you say, yeah, you give your best shot and accept the result. That's also acceptance. But there's the other acceptance where there is no shot to give, it's just happening. The acceptance you're talking about is a little bit different, but similar. If you give it your best shot, you feel like you have some control. But if something just happens you have no control of, it's harder. But what else? What's the alternative to accepting?
Then we are denying action totally.
Yeah, it already happened. Especially if it already happened. There was one spiritual teacher said that sometimes you're in a situation and everything is going the wrong way. And it's like the whole universe has conspired at that moment to make this happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. And you still don't accept it. It's like every 33 million demigods have conspired to make this happen right now. And you're not accepting it. And you're going to do something about it. You know? And you suffer and you waste a lot of energy trying to make it, change it. Now, if you can change it, then yes, and you can change it for the better, then you should try it. But if you can't, then it's foolish to try, and it creates more anxiety. Right?